I'd like to thank Birch Living for sponsoring this video. Do you need to hang a quilt? Not all quilts are made for lying on a bed. Some quilts are made for the wall. Some you want to show off, and some may be hanging at a quilt show. Sometimes all of the above. There are so many ways to hang a quilt. Here are 6. So stick with me and I'll show you how to do it. Hi, I'm Karen Brown of Just Get It Done Quilts. I give you tips, tricks, and strategies to help you make the quilt that you want to make. And if you like what you see, please click that subscribe button. Sooner or later, you'll need to hang a quilt. It might be a quilt that you're proud of, or one that was specifically made as a wall quilt. You might decide that a quilt with its color and texture adds to your decor, or maybe there's one that's full of memories and you want it in your space. So here are 6 different methods and why and when you should use them. A hanging sleeve is the most traditional method. You sew it to the top of the back of your quilt and run a rod through which it hangs from. Then the rod is mounted on the wall. And this is how you make it. Cut a piece of fabric 8.5 inches wide and as long as the width of your quilt. For most quilts, this will mean cutting 2 or 3 width of fabric strips and sewing them together with a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch seam. Press your seams open. For the ends, fold over the end by a 1/4 inch and then again.
Give it a good press.
And then top stitch the fold. Now press the strip in half with the wrong sides together. Then fold both edges to the middle. Give it a good press. Then with the wrong sides together, sew at a 1/4 inch, pressing the seam open.
Be careful here, as you don't want to disrupt those crisp folds that you previously made on the sleeve. I am using a do-it-yourself tailor's ham, and I showed you how to make one of your own in this video here.
Next, lay out your quilt with the top of the back accessible. Place the sleeve with the seam side against the quilt with one fold aligned against the binding. Pin in place along the folds. The sleeve will have a slight gap now. With a whip stitch, hand sew the sleeve to the back of the quilt and it's ready to hang. Some of the advantages of this method are the hanging sleeve is what most quilt shows will require the entries to be shipped with. And it doesn't matter which fabric you use because it won't be seen. So here is a great place to use up the ugly stuff. This method is tried and true and possibly the best method at distributing the weight across the width
with no distortion.
It also hangs straight across the top, which means that it will hang square as long as the quilt is square. However, though the sleeve is simple to make, it is not effortless. So give yourself some time to make it. Don't leave it to the last night before it needs to be shipped. If you are hanging your quilt at home, you need to supply a rod and a way to hang the rod. On smaller quilts, you can use a rope and a nail, but on larger quilts, you will need to affix a sturdy curtain bracket to the wall at a fixed height. Command strips are made from 3M, and they can now be found almost everywhere, from hardware stores to the dollar stores to Amazon. And you'll need at least 3 large ones. Draw a level line on the wall the width of the quilt. Attach a command strip along the line at both ends and the others spaced in the middle. For your quilt, you will need matching pieces of Velcro cut from the hook side. Cut them at least 1 inch longer than the command strip. Attach them to the back of the quilt at the top edge of the binding. Place one at both ends and then the remainder spaced out in the middle. Now align the quilt so that the Velcro lines add up with the command strips. Press the quilt Velcro into the command strips. You will need to press as much surface area as possible of the Velcro into the strips for maximum hold. And then you're done. Now you can see that this is a fairly fast and simple method, and it isn't permanent to either the wall nor the quilt if you use pins like I did. And this method works really well with quilts that aren't square. Just add command strips where you need them. However, this only really works on small, or rather lighter quilts. There are a number of different hanging clips on the market for curtains and shower curtains. You're looking for ones that have teeth and the spring strength to keep them shut. You will also need a narrow rod or wire to hang them from. Here I am using an IKEA wire called Dignitet and clips called Rigtig. I also have the extra mount in the middle so I can mount really big quilts if I need to. You attach the clips to the top of the quilt around the binding.
I start in the middle, then I put 2 clips on the ends, and then I divide that in half, and then I spread the other clips out evenly.
Then hang the clips from the wire.
Hold the weight of the quilt
Until you have at least half of the clips on the wire. Start with several in the middle and several at the ends, and then fill in with the remaining clips. This method is great as you can attach the wire mounts not only to the wall, but the ceiling if it's fixed, or to the side walls. And this method can handle some pretty large quilts. This one is 103 inches wide. And since this method is designed for curtains, you can easily push the quilt off to the side if you need to. However, it is a bit maddening
how easily the hooks fell off the quilt.
and the wire while putting the quilt in place. I tried several ways, putting the clips on the quilt and the hooks on the wire, putting both the hooks and the clips on the quilt, and then I tried both the hooks and the clips on the wire, and I found that the hooks fell off in all methods. So you just need to be patient and accept that a couple of hooks are going to fall and you need to pick them up. The wire also dips so that the quilts don't hang square. So if you need it to be flat for photos or just simple aesthetics, for many quilts you'll need to augment it either with command strips or with painter's tape to help make it smooth.
And long-term hanging of your quilt this way will lead to a small distortion in your top binding.
Before I go to the next method, let me tell you about Birch Living and the mattress that's on my bed. Can you have mattress emergencies? This month my son moved into a new apartment and he decided to get a bigger bed, which meant a new mattress. And it's sure nice when I can recommend the mattress that's on my bed. Birch Living is a mattress in a box company that makes mattresses that are fiberglass free, crafted with responsibly sourced organic and natural materials such as organic cotton, organic wool, and 100% natural latex. Their mattresses are also free from polyurethane foams, which can cause harmful off-gassing. It comes rolled up in a box, and as you can see, it is straightforward to set up yourself. My son is serious about getting a good night's rest. I think they call it sleep hygiene now. And I can definitely vouch that I sleep deeper and longer on my Birch mattress, partly because those organic materials help keep me cool and regulate my temperature while I sleep, which translates into less groggy days. Birch delivers mattresses straight to your door, free within the US. They also offer in-home setup and removal service to make your buying experience as convenient as possible. I love my Birch mattress, and I think that you will too. Check out birchliving.com/quilts to start sleeping better and to get 20% off your Birch mattress. I learned about this method from one of my quilt buddies when she was doing some outdoor quilt photography. She used this heavy-duty double-sided tape to attach a quilt to a wooden fence. Not only was the tape strong enough for one quilt, she was able to use the same tape for a second quilt. So I decided to take it for a test drive. First, you cut a piece a touch shorter than the width of the quilt. It is best to pull back a corner of the tape before you place it on the wall, or you will find it a challenge to do afterwards. Ask me how I know that one. This is my mini quilt made by Christy Carter from my MQG mini swap, and I'm very glad to finally get it on the wall. But honestly, I knew that this was going to be able to handle a mini quilt, so I decided to test drive it with a twin. So one of the advantages of this method is that the tape can be shifted. If it's not high enough or level in this initial mounting, you can have a couple of do-overs. This method is also great if you want to hang a quilt around a corner or a door frame. So this is a great temporary hanging technique, like when you need to take a quilt photo. And when I say temporary, this quilt has been hanging trouble-free for over 5 days. And when I choose to remove it, I just pull it away from the tape. But I am unsure how well the fabric would stand up to the glue if left for longer periods of time. Now for the cons. I found it really challenging to remove that second piece of tape. With both projects, it was much harder than it should have been, so this is a fiddly method. I also found that the tape stretches a lot, so you don't need as much as you think you do. And you will need to be careful when you remove it from the wall.
I found the tape broke into small pieces. I tried applying some heat, but still it continued to crumble. So it was going to take a lot of time and effort to get this off the wall.
I have really embraced magnets in my sewing space in the last couple of years. I use them in my long arming, I use them when I cut, I use them when I assemble my quilt, and I use them for hand piecing. But would they be strong enough to hold up a quilt? So I did this test run with this steel shelf at my studio. Honestly, going in, I thought I would need more than 3 of my Sew Tights magnums to hold this lap quilt, but I probably could have done it with 2. To replicate this on a wall, you will need some steel plates for it to mount to. I looked in my junk drawer and found these steel brackets that I could use, but you could also use dock plates and something similar. Be sure to test that they are made out of steel. Zinc or aluminum brackets will not work. The downside with this method is pretty obvious. The magnets are visible. Sew Tights actually has a quilt mounting system with gray magnets and a mount for the wall, which is less visible. So if you are a teacher or a store or a quilter who just likes to switch out their quilts a lot, this would be a great, fast and easy setup. For a different type of look, you can mount your quilt on a wood frame.
A couple of months ago, I finished the top for an old UFO. And though I knew I wanted to quilt it, I also knew I didn't want it to have a binding. So I took inspiration from an old quilted panel of my grandmother's, which had been mounted on a wooden frame. The problem was it was no longer square. So after some discussions with my husband and a trip to Home Depot, I decided to make a frame of 1x2s stapled onto some 3mm press board, which I had Home Depot cut to size. This quilt top will have facings instead of binding, so I lay out the top and mark where I want my sew lines to be. Then I cut 4 2.5-inch strips of Kona putty on the straight of grain so that I can control the stretch. I sew the facing strips to the top with a 1/4-inch seam where I have marked the quilt. Managing the weight of the top is an issue, so I am using this stool beside me to assist. I sew one facing to each side, and then to the top and to the bottom. I press all my facings flat, and I press them towards the outside edge. And when all the facings are done, I flip the quilt and the frame over so the quilt top is face down. Before I start stapling, I just adjust the wooden frame to be sure that it's in the center of the quilt. I fold under the edge of the facing and then put one staple in the middle of the side, and I repeat with the other 3 sides. Then one side at a time, I staple the facing out from the middle, leaving the corners open. For the corners, I fold and flatten one side and staple, then trim out any excess fabric to remove bulk. Then I tuck in the facing to make a square fold. I secure with 2 or 3 staples, and then repeat with the other 3 corners. I am really happy that I mounted this quilt. It has such a fun vibe now, looks so fancy, and it looks like art. And since I stapled the facing and not the actual quilt top, if I change my mind in the future, I can still cut it off, and bind it. Though it was pretty straightforward to do, you needed a specialized tool, the staple gun. And the press board did add a lot of weight, so I need to mount it well so it doesn't fall down.
Now, there are a number of other systems out there. There's the Hang It, Dang It system by Laurie's Country Cottage. There's the magnetic invisible quilt hangers, though I found that they were a little bit expensive for me to import, and I somehow got the feeling that they might no longer be manufacturing them. There are wooden clamp hangers, and you are looking for ones with a curve in them that can clamp over your binding. And of course, you can use nails and staples if you must. These will put small holes in your quilt, but as a friend who has decorated her whole house with her quilts says, they are my quilts and I can do what I want with them. One last thing, wherever you mount your quilts, be aware of direct sunlight, heat sources, and damp, all which can do irreparable damage. This might be my last video in my Make Your Quilt series. I have walked you through choosing your colors, making sure that you cut accurately, sew straight, and press, don't swish. I've shown you how to sash, choose a backing, make a quilt sandwich, and quilt it. Then how to put on a label and how to bind it. Now I realize I haven't done one on borders, so I guess that will be my next one. If you want to watch any of the videos I mentioned, check out my Make a Quilt playlist here. Take care, and I'll see you next time.